I think the beauty about our community in the Blue Valley School District is that we can all work together.
You're really always just looking forward to just go back to school.
Just to see the pride that people have in Blue Valley School District year after year is so much fun to watch.
You can't find this anywhere else. I am so thankful we live where we live and can have our children in the Blue Valley school systems.
Hello, Blue Valley community. Welcome to another edition of our Blue Valley podcast, Blue Valley Unmuted. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Tonya Merrigan, and I am the proud superintendent of the Blue Valley School District. And today I have three very special guests with me to talk a little bit about the 2025 Kansas legislative session. I have Board of Education President Gina Knapp, as well as Board of Education Vice President Jan Kessinger, and then Jeremy McFadden, who is our Chief Financial Officer for the district. Thank you for joining me today to discuss the upcoming legislative session, our priority positions, and how families can get involved. Many of the decisions that are made at the state level play a role in shaping the future of education. Each year in Blue Valley, we have the opportunity to work together with our legislators to advocate for our schools, students, staff, and community. I thought we would start today by talking about how the legislative session works for those listening who might be unfamiliar with that. We're lucky to have Jan Kessinger, who many of us know as a Blue Valley board member, but you might not realize that he also served in the Kansas House of Representatives for 4 years. So Jan, could you give us a brief overview of the legislative session and how bills and laws are developed and eventually make their way to the House and Senate floors?
Sure. Thank you, Tonya. The session runs each year from January through early May. Early on, bills are submitted by legislators, lobbyists, via the legislators. They're assigned to committees for hearings, and if a bill is heard, that bill may or may not be voted on or acted upon. Then if it passes out of committee, it goes to the floor of the chamber. It's voted on, and if it's passed, it's voted on again the next day for final action. A lot of voting going on. But then the bill will go to the other chamber for the same process, and if it's amended, it bounces back to the chamber of origin. And if not approved, a conference committee will work out the details. Then it goes to the governor for signature or veto. If it's vetoed, it comes back again. There's a lot involved in it.
What are some key dates that we kind of need to be aware of as we think through the legislative session?
Well, early on in a session, bills have to be introduced within like the first 3 weeks or so by legislators, but a committee can introduce a bill, and at turnaround, which is about 6 weeks into the session, supposedly all bills that are going to be considered are introduced, but that's not the case. It's they have exempt committees where you can introduce a bill to. But then another 6 weeks goes by after turnaround. That's when it goes to the opposite chamber. Then we come back for a final session. And then we take a break in April, come back for the veto session, which ostensibly is to consider any bills that the governor has vetoed, but it has become a mini session unto itself. And then you have sine die, which is the last day. It's interesting to me when I was there that there are so many bills that come through. There's almost 1,000 introduced. And the only role of the legislature that we're required to do is to pass a budget.
So, Gina, why is it important that Blue Valley Board of Education develops a legislative position every year?
You know, the number one purpose of our legislative priorities is to make sure that Topeka knows what our district feels is the best for public education in Kansas. Not just our district either. We are not only looking at our school district when we're establishing our priorities, but also what's best for students throughout the state. Of course, we have more of a focus on the eastern side of the state, but funding special education, mental health, all of these priorities that we're going to talk about are really things that are shared needs throughout the state, and they're brought forth to the board by the superintendent and, as you know, and her key cabinet members, including Jeremy, and to help us understand the best way we can advocate in Topeka for our school district.
You know, each year we set some priority positions. Some of them transfer over from year to year. Some of them are new. And so this year we have 5 priority positions that we will be advocating for in Topeka throughout the course of this session. And one of them that is really going to be key to us is to establish a fair and equitable school finance formula. So Jeremy, why is that so important now? And what's happening over the course of this year and next year that would make us put that as a priority position?
The school finance formula is really the mechanism that connects state tax resources with school district operations. And this current school finance formula is in effect until, I believe, July 1 of 2027. Over the next couple of years, as ideas are going to be discussed about, what is working in the current formula versus maybe things that, could be revisited, it's going to be important for Blue Valley to speak up and make our priorities known in terms of how our budget works and how the funding impacts us. There's a lot of good things in the current formula that are driven by, such as contact minutes for English language learners, contact minutes for career and tech ed, education, transportation costs drive transportation funding. But there's one element that I think in the current school finance formula that'll be important for Blue Valley to focus on is our at-risk funding. Currently, that funding is determined by students that are eligible for free lunch status. It would be, I think, worthwhile over the next year to explore, is there ways for at-risk funding for Blue Valley to be tied to other costs that we incur, rather than have maybe a disconnect between free lunch status and the funding we receive. So sometimes that free lunch status funding isn't quite adequate for us to serve this at-risk population. So I think as the formula becomes front and center in these discussions, it's going to be really important for us to speak up about how at-risk is an issue in Blue Valley and maybe ways to find ways to finance some of those costs that we have as a district.
Yeah, so the school finance formula is so crucial for us because it actually, if it's funded well, can help us with the second, or another, not the second, but another of our priority positions, which is to support recruitment, retention, and alternative teacher certification. So Gina, why is it so important that we focus on the recruitment and retention of our teaching and really all of our staff?
Yeah, so in the last several years, we've seen a decline in the number of folks graduating with education degrees. So this makes it much more competitive for us to hire teachers and administrators. And so as we support measures in the State House and Senate to bring more teachers to Kansas, it's because we're not graduating enough teachers here in our own state. So we need to be able to find other ways to gain teachers, administrators, paras, all of it.
And Jeremy, just as a note to the people listening, the extra money that we've gotten from the finance formula over the last couple of years, what has the majority of that money gone towards?
It's exclusively, I shouldn't say exclusively, primarily, it's been supported in the teacher salary schedule, classified compensation. So the last 2 years, I believe the raises for those staff members were 6% and 7.4% respectively. So when that extra money is invested by the state into the finance formula, we're proud here in Blue Valley to make sure that it translates to higher teacher compensation, higher compensation for our support staff.
That's such a key thing for our district, and we hear that from our community over and over, is to support our staff, the amazing staff that we have. And so I would reiterate what Jeremy just said, which is that any extra money we get specifically goes to support those staff. Jan, one of the priority positions that we've had for several years, I think since I've been the superintendent for sure, is that we oppose tax credits and vouchers for private schools. Why has that been so key, do you think, for our Board of Education to make sure we advocate against vouchers for private schools?
Well, vouchers for private schools, that money has to come from somewhere, and that somewhere would, the first option is they take it from public education funding. Currently we're funded at a minimal level as required by the Constitution in the state of Kansas. If you shift money into the vouchers or tax credits, it takes money out of the public school funding, and it just cries out for another lawsuit, which was settled after 19 years of litigation. But what's worse is if we lose students, we lose funding for those students, then we've got to cut support staff, librarians, reading specialists, many people. Or we cut classes or programs that serve the diverse needs of Blue Valley students in the interest of that entire student population.
Yeah, I could not agree with you more. A longtime position for the Blue Valley District has been that we think that public money should go to public schools. And one of the reasons for that is, I would say, kind of ties into our next priority position, which is that we believe that the state should meet their statutory obligation to fund special education. Private schools don't have to necessarily take special education students, but we as a district do. So Jeremy, first, why don't you talk a little bit about the disconnect in funding for special education?
Yeah, so special education services, federally mandated, we provide them regardless of cost. Most of the cost is associated with our special education teachers, our paras, transportation for students with an IEP need. So that funding last year in fiscal year 23-24 in Blue Valley totaled about $64 million. So the state finance formula provides reimbursement for some of those costs, but it does provide a deficiency in funding. And last year that was about $13.7 million for the Blue Valley budget. To kind of put that in context, so where does that money come from? It comes from our general fund, and our general fund is the primary fund that we use for staff compensation for teacher pay. So again, if we were using approximately $13.7 million of general fund monies to help with the excess cost of providing special education services, in 2024-25, this fiscal year, we're budgeting about $135 million on certified teacher contracts alone. So if that $13.7 million was in our general fund available for compensation, like overnight, we could increase teacher pay by close to 10%. So it's really important that excess cost is funded by the state. It translates directly to higher teacher pay, and that's obviously a budget priority for us.
And Gina, still on this special ed topic, the board has been so supportive of our special education students and programs. And so this is by no means that we want to reduce special education or get rid of special education. We just need it funded. So talk to us a little bit about how an IEP works. Do they have to get permission to put something in an IEP?
So as far as an IEP goes, there's nothing that we can deny when it comes to the needs of a student. If a service provider determines that they need occupational therapy services or a teacher for the deaf or hard of hearing, then we're required to provide it. And we do so happily because we want to provide the best education possible for all of our students in Blue Valley. And there's costs associated with this. So to tie it back to vouchers for private schools, the money that would come out of the public education pool that would go to these private schools, they're not providing the services for IEPs it's much more expensive to serve children that have special needs. And then to tie it back to, there's a lot of discussion about where does the money come from? It comes from our general fund, and people like to talk about how public education is fully funded in the state of Kansas, but it's not when it comes to special education, because that then comes out of our operating fund. So like Jeremy said, we could increase teacher salaries overnight if we had all of the special ed funding. So there's a lot of things that work together in this whole process with our priority positions. They all tie back to funding, teacher pay, what's best for our students. And I don't want to overlook the importance of CAPERS and the discussion surrounding moving away from CAPERS 3 and 2 and trying to move everybody back to CAPERS 1, which is our retirement system for our teachers and administrators. It's so important for retention purposes, that we get back to fully funding CAPERS in the way that it used to be.
Yeah, that was a great answer because it all does tie back to funding. And no one has ever called me as the superintendent or as a building administrator to ask if it was okay to put something in an IEP. If a student needs it, it goes in the IEP and we figure out how to pay for it. But it is crucial that we continue to advocate for that funding. And, you know, we've talked about all of our priority positions except the one around student mental health. And we have had this priority position for a couple of years, and the district supports, an expansion of community-based behavioral and mental health initiatives. Our mental health providers in our schools are vital to the success of our students. We're so lucky in Blue Valley, but that we actually have mental health teams in every school. We have a school psychologist, a school social worker, and a school counselor available. Why is it so important? Jan, I guess we'll go to you. Why is it so important that the state expand those community behavioral supports available to our students?
Well, the role of public education, the role of any school, is to help the students learn. It's not to give them a diploma as they walk across the stage. And to be able to help students learn and to be prepared to go out into society, they need to be prepared via we're able to process information in their individual way. Not all students learn the same way, and when we have mental health issues and concerns, they need to be addressed so that a student can learn more. And make no mistake about it, there are so many different pressures on students today and mental health challenges that we haven't seen ever before. And just for the success of the students, we've got to invest more in individual mental health.
Yeah, we need places to be able to send students if we are not able to meet their needs within the school. Some of them need more mental health services than we're able to provide. And so it has been such in the last few years that there have not been places to go. And so anything we can do to support that in our community. So we've spent some time today talking really about the 5 priority positions that the district has. People often ask me, how can they get involved? So Jan, we'll go to you. How can the public get involved to help us advocate for these priority positions?
Yes, thank you. I realize as I was thinking back when I talked about how the legislature works, I basically talked about how to build a watch instead of what time it is, because a key role for patrons, if they want to be able to have successful public education, is to be in touch with their legislators and let the priorities be known, not just from the Board of Education. Individual contact to legislatures is critical, and it makes a big difference. We in the legislature, we'd get lobbyists all the time, but the more you hear from patrons, the bigger weight it will carry. So key dates would be whenever there are hearings in a committee of bills, and that can be found at kslegislature.org, is a key time to be able to contact your members who are on that committee. Or once out of the committee, get to your legislators and get there fast, because it could show up on the floor the very next day. And then on a final days where they're approving the budget, or if they're in the veto session, beyond that, beyond your legislator, because they're making decisions that impact you and your district.
Yeah. Gina, what about you? What can our community do to get involved and to help?
So our community has a huge focus on public education. It's really one of, I would argue, the number one issue in our community. And you can get involved in this, not just during the legislative session, but year round. There are elections every year. And so vote, first of all, is the number one thing you can do. The second thing is contact your legislators, tell them what you're interested in, ask them what their positions are and how they vote, and tell your neighbors how they're voting, how your legislators are voting, and if they align with what our needs are in Blue Valley. There's a lot that can be done to support pro-public education candidates throughout the years. And so I just encourage you to reach out to any of us or to any of your legislators to see any other way that you can get active.
If I can just piggyback
Of
on
course.
that real quick.
Of course.
Because Gina, you triggered a thought. Many legislators have community coffees, like once a month they have a town hall per se. If your legislator is doing that, make it a point to be there, hear what they have to say, and share your thoughts and your ideas. If your legislator is not holding a town hall, tell them that you would sure appreciate it if they would. And as Gina said, tell your friends, your neighbors to tell your legislators to have a town hall. There's no reason that they should not. They are representing their constituents.
Absolutely. Our district website also has some really great resources. All you have to do is to visit bluevalleyk12.org/legislative. You'll find additional information about our 6 priority positions and also information on how you can connect or contact your state legislators. You'll also find some sample templates, and you also would find any testimony that the district submits to. Also, watch our social media throughout the spring. We will put out some videos around these priority positions. And then watch our board meetings. We always give an update around what's happening at the legislation and how it affects Blue Valley. I want to thank my guests for joining me today as we explored these key issues shaping education in the upcoming Kansas legislative session. As we continue to navigate these challenges, it's vital to understand the impact that these decisions have on our schools, our staff, and our students. We hope this conversation shed some light on why our 6 priority positions are so important to the future of our students and to the Blue Valley District. Thank you for joining us today.